It's not even New Year's yet, and we're already talking about players being in the best shape of their life. But I'm going to tell you why that could be significant for Marcel Ozuna, and I'm going to answer many other questions on today's Mailbag episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani, and you can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Check out the podcast at LockedOn_Braves, where you can submit questions to be answered, just like today's Mailbag episode. If you're new and watching us on YouTube, please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, and leave me a comment down below. If you're listening on the audio version, make sure you leave me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you do listen on Spotify and you get your Wrapped and I'm part of it, let me know. Send that to me in a message on social media like many others already have. Make sure to give you a shout out there. And thank you so much for your support here at Locked On Braves. It is a Friday Mailbag episode. Got over 20 questions that hopefully we're going to get to on today's podcast. Several of them about Marcel Ozuna looking fit. Is he fit enough for the outfield? I'll answer that question and why it could be very important for the Braves in 2025. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Well, again, it is a Mailbag Friday episode, and we got a lot of questions to get to. And as always, thank you so much for all your questions that you submit. I do respect and appreciate all of them. It was pointed out to me that maybe I haven't been as grateful for some of the questions that I've gotten and calling them things that I shouldn't. But I do want to just emphasize, I do respect everyone's opinion. I want that to be the main part of this podcast, that I respect everybody's comment, opinion, question. So if you haven't felt that way, I apologize, but I do respect and appreciate every question and comment that you send my way. Now let's jump into the questions. Again, got 24 that were submitted for today, and several of them have to do with Marcel Ozuna. First one from Dustin Mounts, who says, saw a report that Ozuna has lost weight and is in great shape currently. The report also stated that the Braves are considering trying him in the outfield again. What are your thoughts on this? So first of all, I have not seen that report. There's another question earlier that makes reference to a video. Mac McGuire says, have you seen the video of Ozuna slimmed down? Do you think he plays more than 50 games in the outfield this year? And there's another one in here about Ozuna as well. Caden Hurd says, what do you think of Ozuna's weight? Again, I've not seen the report. I've not seen the video. I did see a picture of him, and he did look in good shape. And to be honest, seeing the video of the report really isn't going to change my opinion on what I'm about to say. Do I think Marcel Ozuna plays in the outfield in 2025? Yes, I do. We've talked about this a lot. With Ronald Acuna coming back, he's going to need times in the DH spot. And to do that, you're either going to have to bench Ronald or you're going to have to put him in the DH. And I don't think you want to bench one of your best bats. So in order for that to happen, you also don't want to bench Ozuna, who has been one of your best bats for 2 years now. So in order for that to happen, Ozuna almost has to play in the outfield some. Now, the question from Matt McGuire, do you think he plays more than 50 games in the outfield this year? I'd probably take the under on that. I would say he plays under 50 games in the outfield unless something just goes haywire. I don't know that, him getting into the best shape ever or any of that has anything to do with it. Maybe the Braves have given him the initiative of, hey, can you get in good shape in case we need you in the outfield? It would not surprise me if that conversation has taken place. Do I think it's a good idea, other than to get Acuna's bat in the lineup more as a DH? I don't really want to see Ozuna in the outfield again. Look, if he's getting in great shape and he's slimming down, and that's great, maybe it makes him a little bit, makes his movements in the outfield a little bit better, can move a little bit quicker, maybe. The guy hurts. Watching him try to throw a baseball hurts me. The guy just can't throw a baseball. I don't think he's a good defensive outfielder anymore. As Josh Daniels just said, getting in shape won't help his shoulder or arm strength. And again, that's one of the biggest issues for me. Can Ozuna catch a fly ball? Yeah. If it's in his area, he'll catch it. But again, it hurts me watching him try to throw. And that's a liability out there. We saw it last time he was in the outfield. Everybody is running on him. So again, I don't love the idea of Ozuna getting time in the outfield, but I think it almost has to happen with Acuna coming back and Acuna needing time in the DH spot and not wanting to take Ozuna's bat out of the lineup. I think there are going to be times this year where you're going to have to need Ozuna in the outfield. So I do think it happens. Again, whether or not that's been something that the Braves have asked him to do to get in better shape, to play in the outfield, or that's just Ozuna's off-season workout. Ozuna always looks in pretty strong and in great shape. Maybe he has slimmed down a little bit, but again, I think you will have to see some Ozuna in the outfield this year. I'm not necessarily excited about it, but I think it's just where the Braves are with Acuna coming back from another knee injury and needing to get off of his feet and wanting to keep both of those bats in the lineup. Somebody has to play in the field. William the Worst says, everyone healthy. Who's your current roster opening day starting lineup? So I did a podcast about this a couple of weeks ago, kind of predicting my opening day starting lineup. Maybe the question now is assuming that no moves are made. I still think it's, with Acuna not ready for opening day, I think Michael Harris goes back to the leadoff spot, followed by Ozzy, followed by Riley, followed by Olsen, followed by Ozuna. And then you have Sean Murphy behind the plate. And then you have an outfield of Jared Kelenic. And right now it's Eli White. I think that at least will get replaced. And then Orlando Arcia at shortstop. So that would be my lineup right now. You can't say everyone healthy because we already know Acuna is not going to be healthy, but sans Acuna, that's what I think the lineup would be right now. Destin Mount says, since it was the A's having to overpay Severino to play in a minor league park for 3 years, does this actually affect the free agent market, or do players and teams realize that this is probably why he got so much, since players like Walker Buehler have come out saying they won't play there? I do think the A's had to overpay Luis Severino in order to get him to come there just because, of their situation. I do think they probably had to overpay a little bit, but it's not just the Severino deal. I mean, what the Mets gave for Frankie Montas and others that we've seen this offseason, that these prices have just been high. But I do think that's part of why the A's had to overpay for Severino. So I do think that factors into it. Hayden Harris, what is the one position move the Braves won't make that would be the most likely to cost them in 2025? I read this as, what is the one move, what position that they have to make a move for the most this offseason? For me, it's pretty easily starting pitching. That's why I ranked it, number one must-haves this offseason. And it's crazy to say that because if everybody were to stay healthy in the rotation, if Chris Sale is healthy and pitches like he did last year, if Ronaldo Lopez is healthy, if Spencer Strider comes back healthy, if Spencer Schwellenbach stays healthy, that's one of the best rotations in baseball. Even if you are acknowledging there could be some regression with those guys. In the case of a Chris Sale and a Lopez and even a Schwellenbach in his second year, I still think that would be one of the best rotations in baseball. You just can't count on that. And to get through 162, you need depth in the rotation. And to be able to keep those guys healthy for the end of the season, where hopefully you're in a race for the division, a race for the postseason, you're going to need to give them some breaks throughout the year. So I just don't think you can go into the season with just those four guys, because after them, there are some big question marks, not just the guys that can fill out a rotation, but guys that you feel like can pitch at the big league level, whether it's a Bryce Elder, an AJ Smith-Shawver, or even an Ian Anderson. At this point, there's just a lot of questions behind them. And so you do need to fill that out, because that is one spot where if you don't get the depth there and something does happen, Strider gets delayed or he's rusty coming back, if somebody else gets injured, all of a sudden your starting rotation is a mess. And it's hard to fix that on the fly, especially towards the beginning part of the season. So for me, starting pitching is the spot where they have to make moves. Hopefully I answered that the way you were wanting to, Hayden. AAWX says, would you do this trade? Why or why not? White Sox get Nacho Alvarez, David McCabe, Hayden Harris. Braves get Luis Robert. I would do that trade all day long, which is why I think the White Sox probably laugh at that trade. Not that I'm laughing at your comment or your question, but as a Braves fan, I do that trade every day of the week. It's a no-brainer for me in my mind, and it's a guy I like, Nacho. And I think David McCabe has some pop in his bat. And I think Hayden Harris will be a big league reliever. So I think those are some solid trade pieces. But you're talking about getting a guy in Luis Robert, who, if healthy, which is certainly a big question mark, is one of the best players in baseball. So That's an easy trade for me from the Braves' point of view. I got several more questions to get to on today's episode. We'll get back into the questions here next. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event, and you don't when you use Gametime. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They have killer last-minute deals right there in the app. On the same screen, you can filter for the all-in price so you know what you're paying before you get to the checkout screen, and you can get a view from your seat. It's the only ticketing app that I use now whenever I'm going to a Braves game. I'm constantly checking out the deals that they have because, like I said, they have flash deals going on all the time, but I'm typically checking it out about a week before I'm going to the game. And sometimes those prices go down even more as it gets closer to the start of the game. So I use it whenever I'm going to a Braves game. You can use it for whatever kind of event that you're going to in your area. Gametime gives you the Gametime guarantee as well. That means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you as always for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen, solely getting you caught up with everything happening around Major League Baseball this offseason. This will be the last episode for the week, maybe, as always, offseason and with the winter meetings heating up. I do plan, we may have a lot of episodes next week. We may just have our typical 4 or 5. Really just all depends on what happens and how aggressive the Braves are. I'm expecting it to be a big week with a lot of moves across Major League Baseball. It depends on how active the Braves are in that, whether or not how many episodes we actually have. But we'll at least have the typical 4 or 5. But it could be a much bigger week than that, again, depending on what happens with the Braves. And yes, I am. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm wearing a hat. My hair is absolutely insane. It's a mess. My wife's begging me to go get a haircut, and that will hopefully happen this weekend. All right, let's jump into the questions here. Getting back to these. T Studios says, out of all the Braves, who's the most likely to be in a trade? Only Major League players. And who do you think they could bring back? I don't know that I necessarily understand the question here. There's been a lot of talk about Ozzy Albies. I mentioned that on yesterday's episode, why I think that's just kind of ridiculous. I think the most likely player to be in a trade is Jarred Kelenic. That might be kind of a cop-out here, but I think if there were a move to be made and the Braves were trying to make an upgrade somewhere, that maybe Kelenic, he wouldn't be a feature part of a trade, but maybe you throw it in as a guy that's young, controllable, cheap, that another team might think that they can fix and get going. I'm not saying the Braves should do that, but out of all the players on the Major League roster that I think are most likely to be traded, I think Jarred Kelenic's at the top of that list. Now, who could they bring back in a trade for Kelenic? Again, I don't think he would be the main package in a deal, and more so would just be a throw-in. So I don't know that you'd be getting anything significant back for moving Jarred Kelenic, but I don't think they trade anybody else. I don't think they trade Sean Murphy or Ozzy Albies, which might be the 2 other guys that are maybe on your list of potential trade candidates, but I don't think they do that, and I don't think they should. And I'm not saying I think they should trade Kelenic. I just think he would be the most likely if I had to guess. Big Country, with AA potentially planning to reset the tax and his documented desire to leave payroll room for add-ons at the deadline, is it possible that the Braves are done for the offseason? No. Even if he wanted to stay under the tax, and even if he wanted to leave some room for payroll in the season, there's still $15 to $20 million that you can add to in this offseason and still have a little bit left over for in-season moves. So no, they're not done this offseason. Something will happen. Also from Big Country, with the tax payroll in mind, the Braves have several extensions with escalating values. Would be interesting to discuss pros and cons of those versus steady values in regards to the tax. That is a good conversation, and maybe something we'll do for a full episode at some point. But while these contract extensions have been great, I think mostly great in my mind, and being able to lock up these players and get them done to team-friendly deals, what it has done is it's hurt the Braves in the tax payroll, because again, while Michael Harris might be making $5 million, and this is off the top of my head, I don't have the numbers up, his AAV is 13, 14, whatever it is. Again, I don't have it in front of me, but point being, while a player might be making less money, his AAV is actually bigger because of the guaranteed money on this deal. And that's making their tax payroll higher. It's why you see their tax payroll is so much higher than their actual team payroll, because they have all these extensions in place, which is driving up the average annual value of the contract, which is what the luxury tax payroll looks to. So again, all these extensions have been fantastic because they've been team-friendly deals, but it is also hurting them when it comes to the payroll. So good question. Again, might be a good topic for a full segment on the podcast at some point. Tom Warfel, do the Braves go the trade route to add pitching since free agents seem to be getting deals exceeding salary predictions? I think so, and it's kind of what I talked about when I laid out my plans for the offseason. I think a lot of it has to be through trades because of the prices, and a lot of this is if the Braves are going to stay under the luxury tax threshold, like just the bottom. I'm not talking about exceeding the third threshold. I'm talking about not going into the tax at all. Then there's only about 20 to 25 million left to spend before they hit the first tax threshold. If they're going to stay under that, it almost seems impossible that they can do much this offseason other than trades or just maybe one small signing. So again, I think the trade route certainly has to be the way, and it typically is the way, that Alex is looking to make significant upgrades. You don't typically see him make significant upgrades through free agency either way. Caden Hurd, would you rather trade for Luis Robert and have him at least till 2026, or trade for Kyle Tucker for this year and potentially re-sign him? So I reached out to H-Town Willhouse, who's our Locked On Astros podcast host, because I've had a lot of people ask me about Kyle Tucker, as a trade candidate. I have not heard that the Astros are shopping him. Maybe there were some rumblings in the offseason, maybe early last year when the Astros were down. But H-Town said, I have not heard of them shopping Kyle Tucker. If they do that, it means they sign Bregman and hope to get Framber at a discount. The way I see it, Crane is still running things like we haven't lost every big name that's come up to re-sign except Altuve. So according to him, he hasn't heard that the Astros are shopping Kyle Tucker. It doesn't mean that they won't, or at least won't listen. I just don't know how available Kyle Tucker is. I think personally, just looking at those two guys, and I love Luis Robert, and I've said this story, I've told the story a lot. I live in Birmingham, so I see the Birmingham Barons. Luis Robert is one of the most impressive players I've ever seen come through Birmingham. Just one of those guys you can look at and say, that guy is a stud. But he can't stay healthy, and that is a huge issue for me. And maybe that's hypocritical coming off the season that Kyle Tucker just had, where like maybe he just had an ankle sprain. Turns out it was broken and missed a bunch of time. But I think I feel more confident in Kyle Tucker. So again, it all depends on cost, but I think I'd rather have the guy that I trust more in Kyle Tucker than Luis Robert. Even though I think both guys could be studs and potentially, all-star level players. I do like that you have the added year for Luis Robert. I think I just have more confidence in Kyle Tucker staying healthy and being that guy, even though he is coming off an injury-filled season. Sethan says, where are you going to be dropping for OG Fortnite? I have no idea what that is. I mean, I know Fortnite's a video game. I've never played it. So I will be dropping nowhere. I'll be maybe going to the movie theaters this weekend with my family. That's the plans for the weekend. I don't know if Fortnite's got something going on or not. But if you are, see Sethan, he's apparently getting a group together. John Anderson, which pitcher signing do you think is the domino that has to fall to start other signings? Burns or Fried or someone else? Obviously, Soto is a big factor, but thinking especially about starting pitching. So I think, and the article I referenced in yesterday's episode from ESPN with Jeff Passan and Buster Olney, they seem to think as well that Fried and Burns are affected by Soto. So I think Soto is the domino, that a team that maybe is in on Soto, they turn that money and go get a big free agent starter. So I think Soto is the domino that needs to fall for some of these other signings to take place. I think Burns and Fried are kind of waiting on that. And I know that doesn't necessarily make sense because one's outfielder, the other two are pitchers. And so I get what you're saying and that there might be a difference, but I think a lot of those same teams that are going to be going after Burns or they're going to be going after Soto, might also be going after Burns or Fried. So I think Soto is the domino that we're all waiting on for not just position players, but pitchers too. All right, still have several more questions to get to. Hopefully we'll get to all of them today. And my voice needs a little break, so we'll be right back. Get into the action with the NFL on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets all on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. While you're there, you can look at the World Series odds for 2025. Be really interesting to look at them right now, which really hasn't changed since the offseason started because nothing has changed. But with the winter meetings coming up and a lot of moves likely to happen, including the Juan Soto deal, we may see these odds change here in the next couple of weeks. For instance, right now, the Mets have the 6th best odds to win the World Series at plus 1,200. But if they sign Juan Soto, how does that affect their odds? So again, you can check that out at FanDuel.com, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way that you play. Never waste a hunch and make everyone more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, jumping back into the questions here, still got a lot to get to, and hopefully I do get to all of them. Another one here about Kyle Tucker, this one from Jacob. What do you think of the Braves maybe signing Kyle Tucker, at least as a rental outfielder, and what would the chances of extending him be, if at all? So said signing Kyle Tucker, I think you mean trading, and then extending Kyle Tucker. Again, I just talked to H-Town from Locked On Astros. Doesn't look like they're shopping them. So they have no real reason to move him. I expect the Astros to still want to be contenders in 2025. So I think the Braves would have to overpay to get him, even as a rental player. Maybe if the Astros wanted a pitcher, you throw in would they take in AJ Smith-Shawver and another high-level prospect in the Braves system, take a couple of pitchers in their system for Kyle Tucker as a rental player, maybe, and then can they extend him? Certainly Alex has done a great job of that in the past. I don't see why they couldn't. So again, I don't think it's crazy to say that it could happen, but I think the chances of it happening are very, very slim. PayPay11, almost gave out a PayPal username there. I don't know. Is AJ Minter just gone at this point? I don't hear a lot of chatter about bringing him back, and I don't think he is going to command a deal higher than $8 million a year with his injury history. Seems like a solid price range for a top setup guy. We haven't heard a lot about AJ Minter. I think the reason is just because the uncertainty of his health status. Again, ending the year, spending most of the year injured, ending the year injured. I think a lot of teams are just curious where he is health-wise. I wouldn't pay $8 million a year for AJ Minter, and I love the guy, and he's been great. I've talked about it before, though. I'm worried about AJ Minter and his future going forward. So any team signing him, they probably want to wait as long as possible to see how healthy he actually is. But could he come back to the Braves? Yeah, I wouldn't do it for $8 million. If you could get him on a 4-year deal, or maybe you do one of those deals like you did with Kirby Yates, and you get him on a 2-year deal, and you're paying $4 million in the first year and an $8 million second year with a $2 million buyout, something like that. I could see the Braves doing. But yeah, I'm not running out to get AJ Minter, and I love AJ Minter, and he's been very good for the Braves, but his health status does worry me a good bit. Peterson, do you think there are any free agents next year that the Braves might be targeting that would make them stay under the tax this season? No, just because it's one of those things that until it happens, I'm never going to believe that it's going to happen. Just like the Braves going to the luxury tax, I never thought it would happen, and here we are. We've done it 2 years in a row. But until I see Alex Anthopoulos actually sign one of the top free agents, I'm just never going to believe that it's going to happen. So them getting under the tax, I don't think it is like it was for the Dodgers 2 off seasons ago. I don't think the Braves doing it would be because they see somebody coming up in free agency the next offseason that they just really want to throw a bunch of money at. I just don't think that's Alex Anthopoulos' philosophy, to throw a bunch of money on one guy, right or wrong. That's just hasn't been his philosophy. So I don't see them getting under the tax to set up to sign a big free agent next offseason. Not saying I don't think they wouldn't, but it's, Kyle Tucker, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., those are Bo Bichette. I think those are three of the top names position player wise right now. I didn't see any starting pitchers that really jumped out to me. Zach Gallen was one of the names that I saw. Kodai Senga could opt out of his deal and be available. I definitely don't think Alex would throw a bunch of money at a starting pitcher like that, especially not one in their 30s. But those are some of the names out there, and some of those would be attractive. Like Kyle Tucker, Bo Bichette would be very attractive to the Braves. I don't think them getting under the tax this year, if they do that, is necessarily because they have their eyes on somebody next offseason that they want to sign. Caleb Hudgens, he likes $10 to $15 million for in-season moves. There is no way, in my opinion, the Braves stay under the luxury tax. Let's say they're going to go over the tax. Two options here. Choose one. Sign Willy Adames 6, 150, 25 AAV, or sign Fried 5, 145, 29 AAV, and sign Paul DeJong to a 1-year, $4 million deal. I have no interest in Paul DeJong. I'd much rather just roll with Orlando Arcia for $2 million a year. But if you're asking me, Willy Adames or Max Fried, and the other part of signing Willy Adames is also signing Morton to a 1-year, $8 million deal. If Morton takes $1 million, $8 million, 1 year, $8 million, that should have been done already. I think I want Max Fried. Again, I like Willy Adames. I do, but I think he's getting overpaid this offseason. That deal for Max, compared to what we've already seen this offseason, 5 years, 145, I think I'd rather just do that of those two options. But good question. Let me know, what you think. What would you rather do? Go get Willy Adames or go get Max Fried? That's essentially the question in my mind. Which of those two would you rather have if you could only do one? Jay Smith says, I know you believe we may be under the luxury tax. Really hope that's not the case, because you can't add half the pieces with the available money needed in this market or without depleting the farm, which would be a shame in this window the Braves are in. So not really a question there, but just a thought. I don't disagree with you. I think there's too many holes to fill. And I did a podcast saying that it can be done, that you can make the moves that you need to make and stay under the luxury tax, but it would require you to trade, a big part of the farm. So yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think it's really difficult for the Braves to stay under the luxury tax and put a team together that gives them the best chance of getting to the postseason and winning. I do still think the team intact, if they stay healthy, if they produce like they can still get to the postseason, win a World Series. I do believe that. But I agree with you that the holes that need to be filled to give them the best chance of doing that, it'd be hard to do that and stay under the luxury tax. Michael Lee tunes, with the way teams are throwing out big money deals these days and not giving contracts more than $22 million a year, do you see Atlanta ever having another lifetime Brave like we had in Chipper? Out of Acuna, Ozzy, Riley, or MH2, who has the best chance? I think I'd have to say Riley, because his deal goes well into his 30s. I mean, his deal may take him, and that's assuming he stays with the Braves the entire time. But I could see Riley, of those that you mentioned, I think Riley is the easy candidate. I mean, he's a Mississippi guy. He's from the South. He's already signed a big deal that takes him through his age 36 season. I mean, that might be Riley's career. And again, that's assuming that the Braves never trade him or anything. But yeah, I think that could be Riley, and it should have been Freddie Freeman. Had he just made a simple phone call, had his agent not messed him up, it should have been Freddie Freeman. And that, to me, still stings. But yes, I think it could be Austin Riley. Ecuadorman, hey, Jake, with the skyrocketing prices for starting pitching, what's the max you would pay for Eovaldi? And if it's too much, who would be a backup option you would like to see? I can't think of a backup option in free agency off the top of my mind. I've already said the prediction of Eovaldi getting $22 million a year is already about the max that I would give him. And I like Nathan Eovaldi. I think he's good. And maybe it's just, it certainly is. It's the market value for a guy, but are you telling me you're going to pay him more than you're paying Chris Sale? And again, you can't really look at it that way, because it's the free agent market where, it's supply and demand. And then the price is what the price is. Chris Sale was done in an extension, so you weren't competing against anybody. But when you're competing against others, it's going to drive up that price. I would not want to go over more than $22 million for Nathan Eovaldi. But again, I don't know how he doesn't. Considering what Montas and Severino have gotten, I feel like he could get $24, $25 million a year. And that's too much for me. Again, 22 would even be really the max that I'd be comfortable giving a Nathan Eovaldi. A couple more questions I want to get to here. Apologize those that are alive. Haven't been able to get to a lot of your questions or comments, but appreciate you being here. Over 100 in here right now. Dan Antlers, what about a trade with the White Sox for Garrett Crochet, with Atlanta sending Ozzy, Ian Anderson, Alan Winans, and Lucas Braun to the South Side, bringing back Merrifield on a one-year deal, letting him compete with Nunch over the second base job? I don't think that deal works for the White Sox. First of all, it's been reported that they want position players in return, and you're only giving them Ozzy, who is only under control for 3 more years, I believe, 2 or 3 or 4 more years, I think. And the White Sox aren't going to be ready to compete in that time frame. So Ozzy doesn't really do anything for them. So I don't think the White Sox do that deal. I don't want to give up Ozzy, but I'm all for trading for Garrett Crochet, certainly. But I don't think the White Sox would do that deal. Dr. MJF, Jake, any chance the Braves maybe look to the Japanese league for another starter? There have to be some decent pitchers not named Sasaki. There are some others. If you go look at MLB Trade Rumors top 50 free agents, there's some names at the bottom of that list that are coming from Japan. I haven't done deep research on any of them, but there are other names out there. It's not a market that the Braves have really been aggressive in the past and going after those guys. And a lot of those guys want to stay on the West Coast. Carlos Paulino, with the report that the Cubs are looking to trade Seiya Suzuki, how much of a fit is he for the Braves, despite the interest by the former on finding a left-handed outfielder who has 2 years? He has 2 years left at $19 million each. I like Seiya Suzuki. I got him on a bunch of my fantasy teams last year, and he really performed well. So I like him. I think he's a really good hitter. So I'd be more interested in him than I would be Cody Bellinger. And there is so much talk about the Braves going after Cody Bellinger, and I just don't understand it, other than he's a left-handed bat that can play the outfield and can back up first base. But I think Seiya Suzuki is probably a better hitter at this point. So I would certainly be interested in him. I don't think that's going to happen, but I would be interested in getting him if he is made available. Matthew says, is Joe Jimenez out for the whole season next year? It's possible. They're not ruling it out that he could be back in 2025, but it's certainly possible that he could be out for 2025. My worry with him, and I don't really have time to get into all this because I've heard some people push back on what I think is directly commenting at me and saying that I think the Braves should look to trade Joe Jimenez if it gives you some flexibility to make some moves for this year, just because I don't want to put a lot of stock in a guy who might be back in 2025. And if he is back in 2025, it's going to be towards the end of the season. And you're just counting on a guy to come back at the end of the season, be good and ready to go straight from the start. You throw him into a pennant race, possibly into the postseason. Again, I would need to know more of the medicals and what it looks like, but I would not go into this season saying I'm counting on Joe Jimenez coming back and being a setup guy that we need at the end of the year. If it happens, great, but I would not be counting on that. So that's kind of my take on Joe Jimenez. That's all I got time for today. Again, thank you so much for all the questions and comments. Over 100 people in here with me live on a Friday afternoon. I really do thank you so much for being here. Hopefully I got to all your questions. If not, put it in the comment section below on YouTube and I will get to it there. Hope you all have a great weekend. Again, unless something breaks, we'll be back on Monday talking about the winter meetings. But that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Again, thank you all for joining. Those here in the comment section with me late: Ecuadorman, Josh Daniels, Jeffrey Humphreys, Monty 2K, Matthew 4-Putt, Miguel Fria. Thank you all for joining me. Mass Boost as well. Thank you all for being here. Even BC coming in here with his LA love. Thank you all for joining me on today's episode. And I get out of here before my voice dies. Make sure you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.